Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is KD, and I am going to share a brief orientation with you for the Blue Jeans platform. On the right side of your screen, you will see a list of different options of what you can do in the platform today. The very top is where you can hang up or leave the call. You can see attendees by noting the two icons of people. You can raise your hand using the hand icon and chat with participants via the event function. If you need any technology help today, please use the moderator chat where you can reach Joelle and I of the Global Waters CKM2 team. We will also have some polls during the session today, and we will be taking Q&A throughout the event. Please use the event chat where you can talk with all attendees in order to submit your questions, and we will file them away to address them at the end or during question and answer portions of the webinar. I also want to note for you that you can adjust your settings using the gear icon at the very bottom of the menu on the right-hand side of your screen. This is where you can select your speaker option, as well as turn on closed captioning and turn Blue Jeans events into the low bandwidth mode if you're having any problems with glitches or lagging on the video. Finally, if you would like to change the size of video and content on your screen, there's a slider button that appears along the bottom, and you can change the amount of your screen that is showing video versus the slides today. All right, so please go ahead and ask Joelle and I via the moderator chat function if you have any technology issues. And with that, I will go ahead and hand it over to Jesse Shapiro.
Thank you so much, Katie. Good morning, good day, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to join us this morning. On behalf of USAID and our partners, I want to welcome you to the webinar today that's going to focus on targeted sanitation subsidies research that was conducted in Ghana. My name is Jesse Shapiro, and I am the Senior WASH Advisor and Environmental Health Team Lead at USAID, and I manage the WASH Pals project. The webinar today is put on by the WASH Pals project and its partners. In our quest for support of universal sanitation, we've learned that there is no sanitation silver bullet. Each intervention, like say CLTS, has a very narrow range of conditions where we know it'll be effective. In recognition of this, I think there is a fairly strong consensus that we need to deploy sanitation interventions in a suite approach, or that some call area-wide approach, where mixed methods are used in a carefully layered and sequenced approach. Subsidies are likely a key element of this approach. A World Bank study in 2019 that was called Doing More with Less, Smarter Subsidies for Water Supply and Sanitation made a really interesting case that subsidies in the complexity of WASH are ubiquitous, but often opaque, poorly targeted, and distortionary. However, we have some evidence from Asia that subsidies can be complementary to other rural sanitation interventions. One key is that they must be very carefully targeted. Since these ideas had really yet to be tested in Africa, we really sought out to test them. That is, targeted sanitation subsidies as part of a suite or area-wide approach. I want to extend my thanks to UNICEF Ghana for their generous partnership that really provided us the opportunity to do this research. Without their participation, it wouldn't have been possible. This project is layered on a UNICEF and Government of Ghana area-wide sanitation effort that was supported by the WASH Pals project. While this style of research is not totally unique, it's not extremely common, and USAID is really trying to continue to do this type of research with this project and going forward. In fact, we just launched a new project, Wash Pals 2. So if your organization is interested in partnering on research like this in the future, especially in rural sanitation, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. With that brief intro, I'm going to kick it over to John Trimmer and Joyce Kisiangi, who's going to lead you through the presentation this morning. So thank you very much, and over to you, John.
Great. Thanks very much, Jesse. Hi, everyone. We're happy to be with you today to talk through this work and some of the key findings that we found. So as Jesse mentioned, Joyce and I will be kind of guiding you through the presentation as we get started here. And as KD mentioned at the beginning, we'll also have some poll questions as we go through. So I think the first one of those is going to come up right about now. And we're going to be asking just to get a sense for who in the audience has had some experience with sanitation subsidies, whether you individually or your organization working to implement or put into place some sort of sanitation subsidy program. So yeah, it'll be interesting for us to kind of get a sense of what that looks like in terms of the audience that we've got here. Yeah, so as we get started here, it'll be great if you could fill that out, and we also will have some additional poll questions along the way. So I will, I think, start sharing my screen so that we can see the presentation. And I'll also note that as we go through the presentation, as Katie mentioned, the chat function will be available for questions, and we'll have a few people, Caroline Dallaire and Jeff Albert, monitoring that discussion. And as we get close to the end of the presentation and we start to move into the question and answer period, they'll be flagging some questions for us to talk about within the group. Yeah, so it's great to present this, and we'll be looking forward to your feedback once we finish up the presentation. So Joyce is going to start us off just by talking through kind of the program that we looked at and kind of how we went about this research. So Joyce, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, John. My name is Joyce Kisiangani, and I'm a Research and Program Officer with the Acquire Institute. So this study, the impacts of targeted subsidies for durable toilet substructures within open defecation-free communities in northern Ghana, is a research collaboration, like John and Jesse mentioned, between USAID, who is the research partner, and UNICEF, who is the implementing partner. So I'll briefly take you through the background and the motivation for this study. So CLTS, Community-Led Total Sanitation, has been widely implemented in Ghana and has led to many communities being declared open defecation-free in northern Ghana. In Ghana, for a community to be declared open defecation-free, they have to have at least 80% latrine coverage. However, there's growing evidence that the poor and vulnerable do not always benefit from community-led total sanitation programming, and this is because they tend to construct low-quality latrines, which tend to collapse, and so they revert back to open defecation. And so because of this, there is growing interest within the sector on how best to target, on how best to reach poor and vulnerable households, but there is lack of robust evidence on how best to target subsidies in a way that would affect sanitation outcomes. And so this study evaluates a targeted subsidy program that serves as a follow-up to community-led total sanitation to support movement up the sanitation ladder after a community has achieved its ODF status. Right? We had three main research questions. The first one, to determine to what extent targeted subsidies within open defecation-free communities would result to sustain latrine uptake, quality, and use among poor and most vulnerable households. The second one is to determine to what extent these benefits will spill over to the rest of the communities who are not receiving the subsidy. And finally, to determine the cost and challenges of implementing a post-ODF targeted subsidy program. So like I mentioned earlier, this study itself was implemented by UNICEF Ghana, and the targeting approach used a community consultation process whereby district assembly staff facilitated entire communities to identify poor households within the community. After this, households that were identified as poor through the community consultation process and met an eligibility criteria of being poor, that is, they cannot be able to feed themselves all year round, or were vulnerable with no form of external support, received a voucher that they could redeem through the local artisan to access a durable latrine substructure. Next slide. So it's important to note here that the eligible households were provided with freedom to choose any latrine substructure that they wanted among the three that are highlighted on the left side of this screen. So either the Digni-Lu, which is a pit that is lined with plastic rings and has a plastic slab, the precast concrete, which is a pit that is lined with molded concrete rings and has a molded concrete slab, or the masonry option, which is a pit that is lined with concrete blocks and has a poured concrete slab. It's important to note that eligible households were responsible for digging the pit and putting up the superstructure. So this is the full walls and the roof. The implementation used an output-based payment system whereby after the artisan received the voucher from the eligible households, they were not paid in full until the latrine was complete. And this means that the latrine had the full walls and the roof. So the artisans were paid in 3 installments, 40% down payment before they began substructure construction, 40% after the district assembly official verified that the toilet that they constructed met quality standards, and this meant that the latrine had a durable substructure and had full walls and a roof, and then they were paid 20% 2 months after latrine construction if nothing happened to the toilet. So from the implementation, 14% of households were identified as eligible for the support. And so these are households who were poor or vulnerable with no form of external support. We had 100% voucher redemption rates, and we attributed this to artisans being pre-distribution process. 98% of the households that redeemed their vouchers had their toilet verified by the district assembly official. So this means that 98% of toilets met quality standards. They had a durable latrine substructure and full superstructure. Those are full walls and a roof. So to evaluate the impact that the subsidy had on sanitation outcomes, we conducted a cluster randomized control trial within 109 open defecation-free communities in northern Ghana. In 59 communities, we implemented the targeted support. So this is our treatment communities, and 50 communities were our control communities. We then conducted community consultation to identify households that were eligible and those that were not eligible among all the 109 open defecation-free communities. Then, within the treatment group, households that were identified as eligible for the targeted support received a voucher that they could redeem for the durable latrine substructure through the local artisan. So at this point, it's also important to note that we conducted baseline and endline surveys before and after the program with all the households within the 109 open defecation-free communities to determine latrine coverage, quality, and use. We had 3 main outcome metrics. So the first one is the proportion of households who defecate in the bush when they are at home. The second one is on toilet coverage, which is the proportion of households who own or co-own and use a functional toilet. So co-ownership here means that multiple households contributed to building that toilet, and we define a functional toilet as a toilet whose pit is not collapsed, pit is not full, and has some form of superstructure. The third outcome metric had 2 components. So this is the toilet quality. So the first component is the proportion of households who own or co-own and are using a durable toilet. So we define a durable toilet as a toilet with a full superstructure. So this means it has full walls and has a roof, and it has a durable substructure. So a durable substructure is a substructure with the presence of a concrete or plastic slab, and it's lined with either plastic, rocks, bricks, or concrete. And then the second component under toilet quality is the proportion of households who own. So this is single ownership, who single own and use a latrine facility that is unshared, a durable latrine facility that is unshared.
Great, thank you, Joyce. Yeah, so Joyce just walked us through the subsidy program that was implemented in these communities and the methods that we used to evaluate that program. So what we'll do now is go through some of the key findings from the work. And essentially, we're going to present 4 kind of what we consider to be overarching stories or takeaway points that came out of the data as we were looking at this program. So we'll introduce those 4 here, and then of course, as we go through the presentation, we'll talk through the details. So first, one of the kind of key things that came out of our results was that we see a pretty substantial deterioration in sanitation conditions. So we're talking about kind of an increase in open defecation, a decrease in toilet ownership from baseline, which was before the subsidy program, to end line. And remember, all of these communities have gone through CLTS, have been declared open defecation-free. So this decline was happening after that. Second and third, we'll be talking through the impacts of the program, of the subsidy program, both on the poor and vulnerable households that were eligible for vouchers based on the process that Joyce has just described, and then also the non-eligible households that were not selected through the community consultation process. So we'll be talking about the impacts with respect to both of those groups. And then finally, we'll talk through some considerations around the costs of this program, the cost effectiveness of this program as compared to, say, CLTS on its own. And we'll think about kind of what that means as we move forward. So the rest of the presentation is going to get into kind of the details of these takeaway messages. But before I get there, I just want to mention we have a second poll question coming up in the platform, and that's going to try to get a sense for kind of some of the potential barriers or opportunities that might exist around implementing programs like these in the different places where you all work. So that'll be interesting to see. So the first finding we want to go through, the first takeaway message here, is this deterioration, this decline in sanitation conditions over time as we move from our baseline surveys to our endline surveys. So this slide here includes a number of different graphs, and I'm going to try to give you some kind of orientation at the beginning here, because we're going to be using these graphs several times throughout the presentation. So we have 4 plots shown within this slide. Each of those plots relates to one of the outcome metrics that Joyce described just a few slides ago. So we start on the left with the percentage of households in our communities practicing open defecation as their primary defecation behavior. Then next to that, we have the percentage of households that are either owning or co-owning and also using functional toilets, according to the definition that Joyce mentioned. Third, we have ownership and co-ownership of durable toilets. So these are functional toilets with durable substructures and full superstructures. And then finally, on the far right, we have our 4th plot, which shows the 4th metric, which is durable toilet ownership, single ownership that is not shared. So durable toilets that are only owned and used by one single household. So I think the key thing to focus on here for this point about declines, deterioration in sanitation conditions is the first two plots. So the two plots on the left of this slide. So we see a pretty substantial increase in open defecation from baseline to end line. And we see that both in our control communities, which are shown in red, and our subsidy or treatment communities shown in blue. Now, there is a difference there. The increase in open defecation among our subsidy communities is smaller. It is different. It is smaller than in our control communities. And of course, we'll be talking about that more as we look at the impacts of the subsidy program. But just to finish up with this point, we can also see a mirroring decline or decrease in co-ownership and ownership and use of functional toilets. So we see a decline there in our second graph. Now, when we dig into this a little bit, thinking about kind of what might be causing these impacts, this deterioration, essentially what we find is a pretty substantial issue with toilet collapse. So of course, as we move from baseline to end line, we have more households not owning or co-owning a toilet. So we're increasing the number of households that used to own a toilet but don't anymore. And among those households that used to own or co-own a toilet but no longer do, we see that issues of toilet collapse, so either the superstructure collapses or the substructure, so the pit, the slab, or a combination of these different parts of the toilet. That was the reason that 95% of these households that used to co-own a toilet but no longer do, that was the reason that they don't own a toilet or co-own a toilet any longer. So this is, in opposition to, say, something like toilets just filling up. We have a very small percentage of households that reported that as the reason. So in this context, the reason really seems to be toilets collapsing as kind of this driver of these sanitation declines that we see in our data. So that kind of suggests to us, that some sort of program that would promote facilities that are a bit more durable, that are more long-lasting, better able to handle these difficult environmental conditions might be really valuable. And that is essentially what this subsidy program that Joyce described at the beginning was trying to do. So that's where we'll go next with our second key finding focused on the impacts of the program for poor and vulnerable households. So Joyce is going to take us through this.
Yeah, thanks, John. So I'll take you through the impacts that we observe among voucher-eligible households. So these are households who are identified through the community consultation process as being poor or vulnerable with no form of external support within the treatment group and within the control group. So overall, we see that the subsidy had large impacts among voucher-eligible households within the treatment group, as sanitation conditions among these households improved within the treatment when compared within the control group. So again, if you look at the first graph on your left on open defecation, you can see that open defecation among voucher-eligible households within the treatment group reduced from 25% at baseline to 18% at end line. But when you look at open defecation among voucher-eligible households in the control group, it went in a completely opposite direction, whereby open defecation is increasing from 28% at baseline to 68% at end line. And you see the same trend when it comes to toilet coverage and toilet quality. So when you look at the second graph on toilet coverage, you can see that the proportion of voucher-eligible households among the treatment group that own or co-own and use a functional toilet is increasing from 59% at baseline to 75% at end line. And when you look at this proportion among voucher-eligible households in the control, again, it's moving in a completely opposite direction from voucher-eligible households in the treatment. So you can see toilet coverage is decreasing from 56% at baseline to 21% at end line among voucher-eligible households in the control group. So overall, we saw significant improvements among voucher-eligible households within the treatment group among all our 3 outcome matrices on open defecation, toilet coverage, and toilet quality, despite the deterioration in sanitation conditions that John described in the previous slides. Next slide. So I'll take you through the main impacts that we observed among our non-eligible households within the program. So again, we saw that the subsidy program had impacts on some non-eligible households within the treatment group. Again, for example, if you look at the first graph on open defecation, that was in your extreme left, so you can see that the subsidy program helped to lessen open defecation among non-eligible households within the treatment group. Among non-eligible households within the treatment group, open defecation increased by 34% points. But you can see that among non-eligible households within the control group, this was more. Open defecation increased by 45% points. And again, though we don't see that the subsidy had much impact on non-eligible households within the treatment group, when you look at ownership or co-ownership of a functional toilet, that's the second graph, you can see that the subsidy program on the third graph resulted to some non-eligible households getting a toilet with a durable substructure and a full superstructure within the treatment group. John?
Thanks, Joyce. Great. Yeah, so as Joyce mentioned, we do see, I think, primarily impacts related to open defecation for these non-eligible households, whereas we don't see as much of an impact related to ownership or co-ownership of toilets. As Joyce mentioned, we do see a very small increase in durable toilet ownership or co-ownership, but it is quite small. So we saw that only a few households, a relatively small number of households, actually went out and kind of installed their own facility in terms of these non-eligible households. So what we want to focus on is trying to understand why there was this difference in open defecation, this difference in outcomes related to open defecation among these non-eligible households. So what we found, again, when we kind of looked into some of the details, is really indicative of, I think, the context in which we were in, right? So we have these households are often appear in compounds that contain multiple households. Often those compounds are made up of relatives or extended family members. So we have multiple households that might be kind of multiple immediate families, and then those are all kind of, they all kind of make up the extended family of a certain group. So we have these compounds that contain multiple households. And what we're showing on this slide is we're showing two different scenarios. We're showing one scenario where we have a compound that contains a household that was eligible for the voucher and eligible to receive the subsidy. And then, so that's on the top. And then on the bottom, we have a scenario where we have all non-eligible households within the compound. So when we look at these two different scenarios, the effects on open defecation behaviors among these non-eligible households within the compound are quite different. So if we start at the top and think about this scenario where we have a voucher eligible household within the compound, if we focus only on those other households, the non-eligible households within that compound, in treatment communities where the subsidy program was implemented, their open defecation was considerably lower than what we see among control communities at endline, so after the program was implemented. And this is because the voucher eligible household was able to install this subsidized facility, and then they would share that facility with these other non-eligible households within their compound. So those non-eligible households were able to benefit through this in-compound sharing of the facility. And I think it's important to note here that when we're talking about sharing, we're talking primarily about scenarios where we have something on the order of 2 to 3 households sharing a single toilet. So we're not talking about like a public toilet that's used by many, many people. Of course, it's not a single toilet used by only one household, but it's it's only shared by a few households. So we have that scenario in our kind of top graph, in our top visual. And then in the other scenario, we have a compound with only non-eligible households, where open defecation really doesn't differ very much between our control and treatment communities. So it really seems like this question of whether or not the compound contains a voucher eligible household, whether or not those other households within that compound are able to also benefit from that subsidized toilet. That seems to be what's driving this improvement in open defecation among these non-eligible households as a result of this program. Okay, so the final finding that we want to discuss here has to do with the costs and cost effectiveness of this program. So essentially, what we tried to do here, we did an analysis where we looked at two different scenarios once again. So we first looked at a scenario where that's characterized by only CLTS. So CLTS is implemented, the community reaches open defecation-free status, and then very little or nothing happens after that. So that's essentially the scenario that was represented by our control communities in this study, the 50 communities that were declared open defecation-free but did not receive this subsidy program. And in this table that we're showing on this slide, that's shown in the red column, the first red column there. Now the purple column shows the second scenario that we looked at, where we have CLTS that's then followed up by this subsidy program. So again, we have CLTS at the beginning, the community reaches open defecation-free status, and then at some point after that, this subsidy program is implemented. So again, this is a scenario that is essentially what occurred for the 59 treatment or subsidy communities within our study population. So what we did was we looked at these different groups, these different scenarios, and looked at essentially how things changed from before CLTS was implemented until the end-line surveys that we conducted to get a sense for, first, how each of these scenarios affected open defecation. So how many households no longer practiced open defecation as a result, and also how many households upgraded from, say, a less durable toilet to a more durable facility as a result of these programs. And so what we found, which would probably expect, is that the scenario where we have CLTS followed by the subsidy program essentially allows us to positively impact many more households, and a lot of that has to do with these declines that we see in sanitation after open defecation-free status is reached. So as we discussed before, we have these substantial declines, particularly among control communities represented by our CLTS only scenario here. So through kind of implementing this subsidy program, we're able to sustain those benefits, able to attenuate those declines in our communities, and that results in a much larger number of households that have this positive impact from this sequence of programs. But of course, as you again might expect, this combination of programs costs quite a bit more than it would to implement only CLTS. So what we did was we kind of compared the households that were kind of benefiting or being positively impacted by these programs with those costs, essentially to calculate a cost per household that is benefiting, cost per household that is positively impacted in one of those ways that I mentioned, either through not practicing open defecation anymore or for upgrading to a more durable facility. And what we find in that case is that the cost per this benefiting household is still a bit more when we think about the combined program. So the CLTS then followed by the subsidy program, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 30% more per household that's benefiting than CLTS only. But like I said, this combination of programs also allows us to reach or to positively impact quite a few more households. So there's something of a trade-off there, I think, between cost and kind of the reach that you can have and the ability to sustain the benefits that might come from CLTS and the behavior change that's associated with it. So those were kind of the 4 main messages that we wanted to present today. So I'll finish up just with a few final thoughts and kind of a summary of what we just discussed. So first of all, again, we really want to highlight this decline that we see in sanitation conditions among our study communities. Like I said, these communities were all declared open defecation free. And as Joyce mentioned at the beginning, that requires something in the neighborhood of at least 80% toilet coverage when that happens. And even at baseline, we saw some declines from that, and then it was more so at end line. And as we discussed, this was often due to this issue of collapse, whether that's collapse of the superstructure or substructure, often both. And we feel like this really suggests a need for something more beyond just CLTS alone within these types of contexts, where you have some difficult soil conditions, difficult environmental conditions that contribute to these issues of collapse. Second, when we start to think about the impacts of the subsidy program itself, the subsidy program did help to reduce these declines, help to attenuate that deterioration that we see in sanitation conditions. And that was especially true for voucher eligible households. As Joyce described much earlier, we see kind of a diverging of voucher eligible households in treatment communities versus control communities. The voucher eligible households in treatment communities are going in a positive direction, whereas the others are not. So we see some substantial impacts for those households. And we also see some impacts for non-eligible households that are living in compounds with voucher eligible households. They're able to benefit from those subsidized toilets through in-compound sharing. And I think it's also important to point out that generally speaking, across our communities, almost all of the households that owned or co-owned a functional toilet were also using it. So we didn't have many households that owned a functional facility, but that were also open defecating. And that's also true among our voucher eligible households. More than 90% of those that received the subsidy and co-owned or owned a functional toilet, a durable toilet from that subsidy, were also using it. Third, if we think some more about these non-eligible households, like we mentioned, we saw a few of those households go out and sort of purchase their own durable facilities, but we didn't see very much of that. So that sort of suggests to us that these more durable facilities that were being subsidized through this program may still remain unaffordable for a large portion of these non-eligible households within this context. And this area where we were in, northern Ghana, does tend to be kind of a poorer area of the country, and that suggests to us that perhaps the affordability of these products is still an issue, even for households that are not identified as the most vulnerable or the poorest among these communities. And we also want to mention that there does seem to be some room for improving the targeting methods that were used. So as Joyce described, we used this community consultation method to identify poor and vulnerable households, which is, I think tends to be a good method in terms of, ensuring community buy-in and making sure that everybody's happy with the decisions. But at the same time, there were some discrepancies, between the households that were actually maybe not using toilets or not having access to toilets and those that were selected. So what we ended up finding was that there might be some opportunities to identify different factors or different characteristics of households that might more closely align with whether or not a household has access to a toilet. So we think there's some room for improvement there. And then finally, I think the last point to make here, and this is something that Jesse brought up at the beginning, and that our implementation partner UNICEF Ghana has been thinking a lot about this idea of kind of subsidies as one approach, one part of a broader portfolio, or of a broader kind of mixed methods approach to achieve and then sustain universal sanitation coverage. So again, this is something we've been thinking about with UNICEF, and they're thinking of kind of using this type of subsidy program as one piece of a more comprehensive set of interventions that would include kind of complementary approaches related to maintaining the behavior change that was achieved through CLTS, promoting more aggressively these more durable facilities, especially in contexts that really seem to need them, like the context in which we were working, and really using subsidies to focus in on these most vulnerable households that really seem to be highly unlikely to be able to afford the types of facilities they would need to kind of sustain toilet coverage. So those are kind of the key points we wanted to bring up at the end here. There's going to be one final poll question that comes up right about this time, I think, or it may be up already, related to the different sets of findings that we described, and whether one of those really stood out to you as something you're interested in moving forward and something you'd like to learn more about. But at this point, I think we're ready to open it up for a discussion and to think about some of the questions that may have come up in the chat so far. But I'd just like to take this opportunity to say thank you for joining us and for your attention. And yeah, we're looking forward to the discussion that's going to come up here over the next several minutes. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, John. I think you're right. Do we have a poll popping up? I'll just say while we do this. So there's a number of questions that have come up in both the chat and in the Q&A box. For those that ask questions in the Q&A box, some of them are being answered with written responses. So you just click on where it says one answer or two answered below that, or replies, and you can expand that to see what the answer is if you're curious. Some of those were straightforward questions about the study and treatment versus control communities, or some of the selection criteria. But the first question I want to take verbally to direct to Joyce is, what are the factors on, sorry, never mind. Any other program doing market-based sanitation in the same area where the subsidy was conducted? If yes, what do you think the impact of that subsidy approach was with the market-based sanitation program in that area?
Yes, so there was other market-based programs within the area, but not within our study community. So at the time that we were implementing the subsidy program, UNICEF was also implementing revolving fund program where households could access a durable latrine substructure through getting a loan from the bank. So there were other programs, but they were not within our study communities.
Gotcha. Thanks. There was actually a related question because you just mentioned superstructure. The subsidy was for the substructure in the platform, but not the superstructure. What did you experience in terms of what people used for the superstructure materials? How long did it take them to construct that? What were the costs? What were your impressions of how that went?
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. So yeah, correct. The subsidy only covered the substructure, and for the superstructure, eligible households used local materials, like they used mud for the walls. Most of the time they used mud for building the walls, and they used thatch for the roof. So the cost for the superstructure was like very minimal for them, for the eligible households. And in terms of timelines, remember the program used an output-based payment system whereby the artisan was not paid the full amount until the superstructure was complete, until the toilet was complete. So the artisan did not accept to collect the voucher from the eligible household, and unless the eligible household was ready to dig the pit and put up the superstructure, immediately the artisan began the work. So in terms of the timeline, it was arranged, but it would take around 1 to 3 months for the household to finish putting up the superstructure.
Great. So you mentioned already that there wasn't active MBS programs in the same area as the study. What do you think about the distortionary effect of the subsidy itself in the market? Did you perceive any distortions in the local market or not? How could this be better targeted to not distort the market or support it in good ways?
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. I can start working on an answer to that one. So I think in terms of kind of the effects on local markets, I think one of the things to think about here is kind of the degree to which we saw these non-eligible households, whether or not they were going out and purchasing their own facilities. And we didn't see very much of that. Just to kind of reiterate and provide a little bit more detail there, I think it was only somewhere on the order of like 20 to 40, somewhere around 20, closer to 20, I think, 20 households that in the non-eligible group that went out and actually purchased something from the market. And I think our impression is that that was not like that. To some extent, that came from those households. I think seeing the voucher eligible households install their own of these facilities, but I don't necessarily think that was a major distortion. In terms of kind of the fact that voucher eligible households were able to access these facilities that would not have otherwise, at least in these communities, I think our general sense is that it's not having a huge kind of I guess what I'm getting around to saying is that there didn't seem to be much of a market there, at least among the subsidy communities where we were working, for these more durable facilities. So so I think the fact that we still kind of saw that hold true among non-eligible households by the time we got around to end line suggests that maybe there wasn't so much of a difference in terms of kind of distortions. Now, I think how to make it a bit better in terms of the kind of effect on markets. I think that there might be a couple things we could think about there. One I think is one of the points that we make here at the end of the presentation, related to trying to really get the targeting methods aligned as well as we can with households that don't have toilets, that are not able to afford those facilities, and to some extent, I think that's that has to do with kind of maybe tweaking some of the criteria, some of the selection criteria. At the same time, it might also mean that it requires kind of to some extent maybe a broader application of subsidies, not one that's not targeted at all, but one that I think is maybe able to include a few more households that might be kind of in this sort of in between group where they're maybe not classified among the communities as the poorest and the most vulnerable, but they're still not able to afford the kind of durable facility that they might need. Yeah, so I think I'll kind of leave it there. I don't know, Joyce, if you wanted to add anything to that or not.
Okay. If you have anything to add, jump in, Joyce. Or I'll jump to the next question. So there was a question about, so the poorest households in the treatment communities received a voucher, but was there any treatment that other households, non-eligible households, received in the treatment communities? If you can kind of just confirm that, but then maybe comment on those. You saw a large decline in sanitation conditions in your baseline from what was reported at the end of the CLTS program, and then further until your end line. Why were some of those latrines failing and not rebuilt? And maybe why the non-eligible households that didn't receive the voucher, why they weren't also upgrading? Joyce, do you want to start?
Maybe John, you can start, and then I can add on.
Go ahead, John.
Okay. Yeah. So good questions. I think that so if we start with kind of thinking about the voucher eligible households, or well, maybe not. Let's start with the non-eligibles again. So I think kind of the issue that we see there again is this question of affordability. At least that's what our impression is. Our understanding, kind of based on the data, that the reason that these non-eligible households are also not upgrading has to do with this, just this issue of kind of accessibility, affordability, and whether or not they're able to actually pay the full price for one of these more durable facilities. I think thinking back then to oh gosh, sorry, Jesse, can you remind me of the first part of the question? I had it in my head and then it just slipped out.
Yeah, the first part was just, did the non-eligible households in the treatment communities receive anything since they didn't receive a voucher? Yeah. Yeah,
thanks. Yeah, so I'll speak to that quickly, and then Joyce can jump in. So essentially, when the vouchers were distributed, there was kind of a little bit of sort of like sensitization, you might say, or something along those lines, where there were, as Joyce mentioned during the presentation, there were artisans there at this community meeting present to kind of help voucher eligible households start the process of redeeming their vouchers. And of course, we would expect that, at these kinds of events, these artisans would probably be trying to advertise their services even to other households within the community as well. So there was that kind of group event where these vouchers were being distributed and these facilities were kind of being described and to some extent, I think, advertised. But yeah, Joyce, you can go ahead and fill that in a bit more.
Yeah, like John mentioned, during voucher distribution, the non-eligible households were also educated on the free latrine substructures that were available for the eligible households, and they were given provided with contacts of the local artisans so that they could acquire the durable latrine substructures among the three, any of the three durable latrine substructure if they wanted, but they at their own cost. So non-eligible households were provided also with flyers that had details on these durable latrine substructures that were available to the eligible households. And the artisan also spoke about the option so that they knew that they could approach the artisan and negotiate with them and get the durable latrine substructure in case they wanted.
Great, thanks. So there's a question here about policy. So can you comment on, was this study aligned with the government of Ghana policy on rural sanitation subsidies? And now that we have the findings, now that you've designed the criteria and you have the findings, do you still understand that those are supportive of that policy, or may have an implication to make changes to that policy?
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, thanks, Jesse. Good question. And yeah, I'll start. And again, I think, Joyce, you can probably fill in as I'll probably forget some important things. But yeah, so the policy in Ghana related to rural sanitation does allow for and promote targeted subsidies. So there are guidelines. Ghana was actually the first, as far as I know, the first country in sub-Saharan Africa to implement specifically guidelines for targeted pro-poor sanitation subsidies. So that is something that has been supported by the national government, by the local actors as well. And so that's one of the main reasons this study was conducted in Ghana, because of those policies and those guidelines that were already in place. As far as the criteria, the selection criteria go, so one of the things we were thinking about, at the beginning, when this study was just starting out, was how to do the selection, of course, and what criteria to use. Now, Ghana does have something called the LEAP program, a Livelihood Empowerment Against Poverty program, which has some targeting criteria within itself. That program is, I think, generally for kind of cash transfers and things like that. But there is some thought about using those criteria for other types of programs as well. The reason we didn't use that for this study was because there were the LEAP program had not been fully rolled out across our kind of study context. So we didn't have the results for all of the communities, so we couldn't use it. But I think based on kind of the selection criteria we used and some of the points we made here near the end of the presentation, kind of about ways to potentially improve those targeting criteria, I think the criteria that we used were kind of generally agreed upon by the communities in which we were working, and people kind of felt they were appropriate and the right criteria to use. So I think that's suggestive of the fact that they might be it might be worth thinking about kind of using those, maybe plus some additional criteria to focus on making sure we're identifying those specific households that don't have toilets. Joyce, I think you can probably speak to this better than I can, but yeah, you feel free to jump in with some additional thoughts here.
Yeah, John, like you mentioned, we built on the existing guidelines that were there. So we took the existing guidelines that are being used on sanitation subsidies, on targeting for sanitation subsidies in Ghana, and then we built on that by consulting with the local officials and also piloting it with the communities where we are working with to make the definition of the poor and vulnerable households very clear. So we just built on what was existing by working with the local government and also doing a pilot with the community members to define the criteria to be very specific to the context that we were working in.
Great, thanks both. And unfortunately, our time is short this morning, so we're going to have to wrap up now. So thanks again, John Trimmer and Joyce Kisiangani from Akwaya. for your presentation and the great questions and answers. I think we will all stay on the platform if you have further questions as people need to drop off, but I'll point you, and we'll leave the platform open for another couple minutes because there's a lot of questions and written answers in the chat and Q&A box now, if people want to still have a little bit of time to read through those. The recording will also be available later and posted on our website. So again, I just want to thank everyone who joined us today. We really appreciate it. And we want to thank also UNICEF and our partners in Ghana for the great study and the strong partnership that allowed this to happen. I think we have some really important implications that have come out of this study, including how poorly I think we're seeing the declines in sanitation coverage after, say, our CLTS and could maybe be expanded to some of our other sanitation interventions when done in isolation, and that the power of combining them together, we may see better results and may be able to slow the drop-off of sanitation or slippage back to open defecation. Particularly here, we see that durability with latrines is a big issue in Ghana, and this may point to some implications around how we implement market-based sanitation, targeted subsidies, training around construction, and accessibility to materials and supply chains in the future. It also points to a really interesting factor of the compound sanitation and how providing subsidies may have a multiplying effect in supporting all the households that sit in a particular compound, particularly in Ghana, which is usually not considered as compared to, say, introducing public sanitation facilities versus these compound ones. So that's an interesting factor to consider here and maybe multiply the effect. I also just want to take the time to remind everyone that this research was done by the Wash Pals project, which is ending next year, but USAID has launched a follow-on project, Wash Pals 2, and we're still interested in pursuing follow-on research to this and other rural sanitation and hygiene research initiatives. And so if you're interested in any of that, feel free to reach out to us. If you have further questions about the findings in this study and the implications, please also reach out to us, and we're happy to take those. So thank you all very much. You're feel free to drop off now, but like I said, we'll keep the platform open for a couple more minutes so you can read, and we may try to answer some additional questions. Thanks, everybody. So let's see if we got any new questions. Like they've all had some form of answer in the chat box. So we'll just let people read those if they're interested. Let me look through the chat box.
While you're looking, this is Jeff. I also just wanted to thank all the participants for all these great questions. This is exactly what we hope for when we deliver these findings.
Exactly. Sorry about my dogs. They just wanted to chime in at the end here. Well, it doesn't look like we have any new questions that we haven't gotten to yet. So I think we can just sign off here, but we'll leave it open for a couple more minutes for people to read if they're interested. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.